This is We Love the State. This is the state's favorite podcast. I'm your host, Andy Coons, and over here to my left is Benjamin DeYoung. How you doing, Ben?
Doing good. We are leg free and back at it. Excited.
Yep. Brought to you by Zoom and no longer freeware that we found on the internet.
You get what you pay for, and when you're not paying for anything, it shows.
Yeah. So, got a bit of a weird episode today. Listen, Ben, I don't know if you heard, aliens are totally real and they're basically at our doorstep.
It's funny because it's such the meme of like, they're focusing on the Epstein files, release the UFO files. And, you know, that meme had been going around for a while, and it's like, oh, now we are definitely in a memeified country where they're fact or fiction, you just have to flip a coin.
Oh yeah. The funniest thing about all this is that, like, you know, at work, we've been having these leadership classes, and somebody brought up the Canadian forest fires, and I kind of jumped in. I was like, yeah, it's kind of weird that they all started at the exact same time, hundreds of miles apart. You know, it's kind of weird.
Yeah. Yep.
And the joke that I made after that, because this guy was like, oh yeah, the conspiracy theorists came out, and I was like, yep, it was the Canadian Jews. But
you can do it.
This forest was promised to us 3,000 years ago, eh?
Yeah. And if you're not going to give it to us, we're going to destroy it. Kind of the MO.
We drink the maple syrup from children. Anyway.
I can see the memes now.
Well, there was a guy in there that I know is a different, like, political persuasion than I am. And even he was like, oh, yeah. One guy was like, you know, talking about the conspiracy theorists, and you know, they're like, you know, they don't think that the government's telling the truth. And this guy that, like I said, I know is a different political thing than I am, was like, oh yeah, government and truth in the same sentence, that's rich, you know.
That's all. That is, I think, the white pill, and we've talked about it multiple times, is
Yeah.
people are truly waking up to the fact that the government is your enemy.
Yeah. And it's so widespread across every square inch of the political compass. Like, nobody believes anything that the government, if the government says it, they're like, nope, not buying it, you know? And here's the thing, like, everybody's talked about the eroding trust in the institutions over the past, like, 10 years, you know? And you know what? Trump getting into office with the Epstein files, the JFK files, they could have actually tried to course correct. They could have actually instilled institutional trust from the American people if they had just not flubbed those two things. The Epstein files being way, way bigger of a deal than the JFK files, you know, but still, if they had just came out and said, here's the truth about these two things. And I'm sorry, like, to anybody who watched the debate between Owen Schroyer and Andrew Wilson,
Is it pretty good? I really like Owen.
Okay, so here's the thing. Andrew takes the pro-Trump side. Andrew loses that debate, but Andrew is clearly the best debater, you know, but he picked a losing topic. And Owen Schroyer, who is not much of a debater, you know.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen him in a debate.
Well, you can, like, you watch him and you're like, that's kind of his journalist genes coming out, you know, where, oh, you may, like, I don't know. He would do lots of straw man fallacies and stuff like that, but Andrew was clearly the better debater. But you could just listening to it, it's like, even Owen, who's not a debater, really mopped the floor with Andrew, because it's just like, you cannot look at Trump's second term as a success at this point, you know?
Right.
And trying to convince people that it's successful is just lying. You see this with Tim Pool. Tim Pool's show has gone from being a a a relevant political discussion, you know, to where it's you can't even watch it. And a lot of people stopped watching Tim Pool, a while ago, but like he was good on certain things. He was really good on certain things. And
He
then
was good when the Democrats were in charge.
he was really good when the Democrats were in charge. But now it's like you go, all one of his videos will cross my feed and it'll still show like Trump with the glowing red eyes, like, oh, he's got the Dems cornered. And it's like, Tim, nobody gives a shit about this. Nobody cares about this man,
Well, and
you know?
his numbers have been cratering just as almost very similar to the Daily Wire's numbers.
Yeah.
And you can see that both him and the Daily Wire, instead of self-reflecting, they just want to blame Candace because she's telling a lot more truth. I mean, granted, she is fringe and she is
Hmm.
throwing a lot of things at the wall and finding out what sticks. And I think that's part of her podcast.
Yeah.
But they are so angry with Candace, like because she's succeeding and they're failing.
Hmm.
And that's, that's there isn't a very, there isn't a broad marketplace that's unregulated anymore. Everything is, we're pretty much living in a version of fascism,
Hmm.
except on the marketplace of ideas. We still have voices and there is still competition over ideas.
Hmm.
And you can clearly see the Tucker, Candace, Dave Smith, the people who have the best ideas and the speaking the most truth are winning. And it is good to see in when you look at all the other crap that we're having to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. It's man, the landscape has changed so much just in the past, what, year and a half since he's taken office. Um, and it's just it's weird to see the people who have kind of crumbled and the people who have stayed. And listen, me, huge sip for Dave Smith. Dave's out there rocking it, man. He's still out there just coming out on top of everything. And Clint just did Julian Dory's podcast. it's
Yeah, I
it's
can't
the
wait for that.
people in our camp who from the very beginning they were like, listen, I'm just gonna tell the truth. Which, like, I know everybody in the mother says that, but like when Dave and Clint talk, you can just tell, like, they're like, I don't care if this hurts your feelings. I don't care if this makes me look bad. I don't care. This is what the truth is, you know?
Yeah,
But
Clint especially has just been on fire, and it's been really fun to kind of watch him kind of find his own voice.
mhm.
Because I think he probably would admit this too. I think he was in the shadow of Dave Smith. Dave really helped promote him, and they are good friends. But you can really start to see him differentiating himself in the last year or two,
Yeah.
um, because he is willing to go further than Dave. The one thing that bugs me is if he hasn't been able to touch it, he won't talk about it. And so it's like if there's not a complete truth out there, so he shies away from any theory, any conspiracy. He only wants to talk about what is actually happening that's provable.
Yeah.
And that's probably the best path to prevent you from getting in trouble. It's probably the best path for not giving your enemies ammunition to attack you on, because that's what they do to Candace 24/7. Because she is dealing in the gray. She doesn't, she isn't completely black and white where Dave wants to stay in that lane. And Clint, I think he's done a great job of kind of straddling,
Mhm.
that line of fact or fiction. And I think he does it in a way that is extremely valuable, but still looking at like who benefited from Charlie Kirk being axed. You
Mhm.
know, we're not just going to talk about who did it, but who benefited. Like you got to look at the entire story and not just the facts on the ground as you see them or that
Yeah.
that are being presented to you.
Yeah.
What do you think about? Have you seen any? Are you on? You were talked about getting off of X. Did you quit?
Yeah. I deleted my ex account. So anybody listening, if today was the day that you were finally going to pull the trigger and be like, you know what, I am going to follow Andy on X, It's gone.
Now, if you want to
So
follow Andy, you're going to have to stalk him like the rest of us.
yeah,
So you have to
exactly.
physically follow him.
I've got this giant window behind me, plenty of room for, and there's woods out there. I'm not going to see you, you
Bring
know?
your tent.
Yeah, bring a tent. So,
Well, anyhow, on X, there's a big thing with Dan Bilzerian and Nick Fuentes now because Nick had bashed Casey Putsch, who was running for the Ohio governor. He was a great candidate,
mhm.
and for some reason, Nick was trashing him, and Nick has not supported Thomas Massey, and he's gone kind of off the rails. So like Dan Bilzerian is, basically calling him a Fed in every post. So it's an interesting dynamic to watch some of even the infighting on the voices on the right, trying to kind of come up with, what's happening. And that I think the Nick thing is it bugs me probably more than most simply because it's kind of a libertarian tactic.
Yeah.
It's I'll sit behind my computer and throw rocks,
Mhm.
but I'm not going to help build anything. I'm not going to actually run for anything. I'm not going to actually, like pound the pavement and make positive change. He's more in the lane of like, I'm just going to sit here and watch it all burn. And, I think that, what is that called? Accelerationist, where you just want to get past the destruction and move on to the next. I get that. I get that theory and that motivation of like, it's kind of hopeless at this point. We need to break down the empire
Yeah.
and then build something good on the other side. So I get that, but at the same time, to trash the good voices or not support the great voices like Thomas Massey, it's like what's your angle?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I don't. Nick is
I
just. I think he's young. I don't know if I'd call him a Fed, but I think he's just immature.
yeah, for sure. Like he it the maturity is definitely uh a thing. Like it's weird because whenever you listen to him talk, he is man, he is a very very talented like orator, you know. Whenever you listen to him talk, you're like you think that you're watching somebody who's 40, you know? But then it's the moments where it's like, hey, Epstein had aura. It's those moments where you're like, okay, there's the retarded 20 something year old, coming out. But like, oh man, I forgot the larger point that I was going to make with this. But yeah, I definitely think it's a maturity thing. You see the immaturity come out, you know.
Right, and
Oh,
and I think
I
there's some
remember
jealousy.
he was like, yeah, getting married is gay. It's like,
That's
what?
the definition of gay is not
Yeah,
getting married to a woman.
yeah. So he anyway, it's just one of those things because I mean, you have kids, you know this. Like after you have kids, there's just a change that happens in people, especially with guys. Like guys are kind of like, well, just people in general before they have kids are kind of self-centered. They're kind of selfish, and the world revolves around them. And it takes having, in my opinion, having kids or just having a family and being like, oh, these are the most important things in the world. They're way more important than I am. They're way more important than my happiness or my personal safety or anything like that. And it's like it's a very humbling thing to have a family, you know.
Well, and I think it makes you a better person because I know for
Yeah.
me, especially for people who may deal with depression, something that we've talked about is, there are days where I just don't want to get out of bed.
Hmm.
But the difference is if my kids are here, I'm getting out of bed and
Yeah.
I'm cleaning and I'm cooking and
Yeah.
I'm mowing, like because taking care of them is taking care of me. And there
Hmm.
are days where I don't want to take care of me because I don't feel like I'm worth being taken care of. But I'm always going to take care of them. So
Yeah.
by default, I better myself because of them being in my life. And so I think once you have that moment of like there is things that I'm responsible for, there are people that I'm responsible for, all of a sudden it does elevate you to
Hmm.
like a maturity level by whether you want to or not. Granted, there are really bad parents out there that maybe never reach that maturity and so they are still putting themselves first, but it does push you into that like you do have to choose. There are going to be times where it's like, what do I want versus what should I do for them?
Right. Yeah. I remember I was going to therapy several years ago, and I was talking to a psychologist, and I told him that I was worried that I had narcissistic tendencies, because I was like, yeah, sometimes, I can be kind of selfish. And we talked about it, and he was like, listen, he was a clinical psychologist, and he was like, I've treated patients with actual like narcissism, whatever that the proper term for it is. And he goes, there's a woman who um would leave her newborn at home with a bottle in its crib as she went out and partied and got, hammered. And then she would stumble home, or somebody would drop her off, and she would sleep it off, and then she'd wake up, and then, this baby who's has this giant rash and has a, 3-day old diaper on. She just make another bottle, put it in there, and go out and party the next night. She's like, and he was like, that is a narcissist. He goes, you're not a narcissist, you
Well,
know?
I had that conversation with a therapist once, and my therapist said, if you have to ask, if you can ask that question, you're not a narcissist,
Yeah.
because a narcissist will never self-reflect to the point of asking if I'm a narcissist.
Yeah. And I mean, same thing with like psychopaths or sociopaths. Like if somebody is, I've seen people who are like, oh, I'm worried that I'm a sociopath. And it's like sociopaths wouldn't
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 worry
worry
about that.
about that. It wouldn't even be a thought that crossed their mind, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, how did we get onto this? I don't even remember.
Mental health.
Yeah.
You come to We Love the State for the politics and stay for the mansplaining.
Yeah. Ladies.
Yeah. Hi, mom.
Just
Um,
yeah, ladies, just so you know, mansplaining is when a man explains something.
oh, that's great. So, kind of back to the UFOs. What do you think? Like, I mean, it's clearly a distraction, but I
Hmm.
think there's some basis of truth.
Hmm.
Um, I saw Bob Lazar was on Joe Rogan again.
Yep, I
He's
watched
putting
that.
together a documentary. It is fascinating, and it's you do have to wonder. I mean, I don't think there's aliens. I think personally, I think this is tech that has been built using probably stuff from like Tesla's files that were stolen after he died, because Tesla found free energy. And if you can harness that and put it into an engine, I think that we are, the U.S. government is sitting on a free energy source, and
Hmm.
that's what they're using for propulsion for these drones. Um, and
Have you seen
they
the
can't release it.
Have you seen the clips of uh is it Paul Krugman talking about like, hey, if the government could like fake a UFO encounter, an alien encounter, that would actually help stimulate the economy to get us through this
Justified printing more
slump,
money.
to justify printing more money. And then on the other side, be like, oh, we made a mistake. Turns out they're not real, but it would get us through that economic slump. Um, I
It was right
think,
from the Watchmen. Wasn't that the one of the cruxes of the
yes,
Watchmen? Is
yes,
a
that
Yep,
that is the plot of Watchmen. Is
yep,
I mean, it's not economic, but it's like the purpose is creating a fake alien attack in order to unite the human race and issue world peace, you know? But in
right.
order to do that, millions of people had to die in order to save billions from war, and you know, so yeah, that is the exact plot of Watchmen. It's so funny though, because I saw this clip, and I remember that Tom Jones, not Tom Jones,
Wasn't he a singer?
yeah, um, Tom Woods. My goodness,
Oh,
sorry,
yeah.
sorry, Tom's. Tom Woods had a podcast. This is how much Tom Woods hates Paul Krugman. All right. He used to have a podcast where the only thing they did is go over the latest nonsense that Krugman said, whether on the radio or in a newspaper somewhere. So they would just make fun of him and rip him to shreds. And they have a cruise ship for this. Every year they do. I don't know if they still do it, but they
The
would
Contra
do
Cruise?
the Contra cruise.
Oh,
I was just like, this
that
is
started
how
because of
much.
Krugman. I didn't
Yeah,
realize that.
yeah. The Contra cruise is a cruise for people who hate Krugman, which I think is so hilarious that one guy can be hated this much that he has a cruise
We can fill a
dedicated
boat
to
with
it.
them.
We can fill a boat with people who hate this guy. But anyway, he said that, and it was like you said, basically the plot to Watchmen, and I was like, you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if he winds up being right about this thing, because it's so ridiculous that even the way that they're releasing information about it, they pulled in these pastors, and all these pastors, by the way, happen to be really good on camera, you know, and we're going to talk to these American pastors first, and it's like, man, like even as a I've been a Christian for less than a year. It's coming up on a year though. Less than a year, and uh you have totally like you've totally ruined my perception of any pastor involved with the Trump campaign, especially with that psychopath woman who's like his
Head of Department of Faith of
yeah,
some.
faith
She's
czar, religion
batshit
czar, whatever.
crazy.
She is crazy, and man, it's since they're bringing in these pastors, and I've seen one clip of a guy who's like, "Oh, they're reptilian-looking people," and just the way that he spoke, he's got this, I don't know, perfect for TV Southern accent. Like he sounds like a Hollywood churned out Southern Baptist preacher. And he's like, "Hey, we saw this reptilian being with big giant black eyes," and I don't know. I'm just listening to it and I'm like, this all feels so performative. It feels like I'm watching an episode of Righteous Gemstones,
Or
and
Black Mirror.
yeah. So it's just I don't think any of it's true. And
Well,
it's like,
it was right on the verge, or right after, like, Israel was buying off pastors to spread like hate against Candace and against Tucker,
mm-hmm,
and promoting like you have to follow Israel because God commands it. And
yeah.
now you're having our government paying, maybe not paying off pastors, but it's like it's amazing how much Christianity has just been used. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that says about.
They're riding the wave for sure. I mean, there's definitely been a huge movement towards Christianity, whether it's Orthodoxy or Catholicism, Protestantism, doesn't really matter. Like all kinds of Christian churches, like across the board, have seen like record attendance numbers, and you know, I'm somebody who's a part of that wave too, which on one hand it kind of makes me nervous because I'm like, oh, is this all just one big trend? Is this all just a trendy
Psyop.
fad right now? And then, 2 or 3 months from now, people are gonna be like, oh yeah, and then go back to never going to church or something. Makes me wonder like what percentage of all these new people are actually serious about it. You know?
Yeah, that's been, I think, one of my biggest critiques of especially the mega churches. It's so performative,
Yeah.
and our people. I'm sure there is a portion of those type of congregations that, yeah, they are opening their Bible, and they are going to go to church, and then and that's what I think you have to do. And I can't remember what pastor. I think it was Rob Bell when I used to go to Mars Hill. And he said, I challenge you. I'm telling you, I read this and this is my interpretation of the readings. I want you to go home and find fault with what I've said and come and talk to me about it because I am just as human as you are.
Mhm.
So please fact check me. And like that's what I wish we saw more of is like, this is a two-way conversation in sermons should be
Mhm.
of this is my interpretation, this is how I see it, but I want you to go and verify and fact check. And I don't think, number one, I don't think that message is being preached. But number two, I think most, or I can't say most, but a large majority of Christians, they go to church to see their friends. The music tends to be more like a concert. You can't even hear yourself sing.
Hmm.
The sermon is maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and it's more about just, patting yourself on the back for coming to church. Then there's an offering, and then you go home, and it's like, what did you get out of it? And I think that's why you're seeing so much drive towards, the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church, is
Hmm.
because there is more substance there than in a lot of Protestant churches, and people are. I think there is a huge hunger for truth and honesty,
Yeah.
and you see that in the political figures. You see that across the board, and even in like podcasts like this, is
Hmm.
people know that we're being genuine. We're not trying to deceive people, and I think that's also being translated into religion.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've visited our local Orthodox church twice now. And so I was somebody who grew up in Protestant evangelical churches, not even really knowing what those words meant, you know? And
It's a
I'm
name on
also
a building.
it, yeah, or like if somebody said Protestant, I didn't actually know what Protestant meant, like where that came from, that it came from like Martin Luther. Um so I've been learning more, and I've barely scratched the surface, but I've been learning a lot more about church history. And anyway, growing up in evangelical churches and then visiting and understanding more about the Orthodox Church, like this is how I've come to understand it. So like when you go into a Protestant church, especially like a hardcore evangelical church, everything from the moment you walk into the door, going to the worship service, listening to the sermon, to leaving, it all orbits around the choice. Like, hey, are you gonna accept Christ? All of it revolves around that one choice. And every sermon, especially at the church that I was going to, every single sermon ended the exact same way. It ended with, "Hey, we've
Kind of
got a
a
team
call
of
to the
people
altar.
stand." Either an altar call, or he'd be like, "We've got a team of people standing by. Everybody bow your head and close your eyes, and if you want to accept Jesus today, just raise your hand." You know, you can, it doesn't have to be a big thing. Nobody's looking. Everybody's eyes are closed.
I'm
And
having flashbacks
well,
just you saying that because it's
well,
yeah.
a year ago, I had done that. I had my whole religious experience, and it was actually like 2 weeks later or something like that that I was finally able to go to church, and I did that. Raised my hand. They gave me a book. A little like, "Hey, welcome to Christianity" type thing. It was, I mean, that thick. But it was it. I read that book. I got like, I don't know, 80% of the way through that book, and um I remember after that, that's just kind of it. After that, you can, at the church that I was going to, you can go to these like growth classes or whatever, but it's really just a way that they find people to do service for the church, whether it's working in the parking lot or working for the production team, or whatever. And like they do a lot of good work. There's also people who like go and volunteer in soup kitchens and things like that, and like women's shelters. And there are people that they would send to like protests, like like abortion rallies and stuff like that, so they could go and like be the person being there being like, hey, abortion's wrong. They do a lot of good stuff. So like for this church in particular, like I don't have any problem with them. And I remember the very first Sunday that I went there, and this is back when I was a hardcore atheist. Um, they were talking about this thing called Project 269, and it was a halfway house for felons who had just gotten out of prison. It's a place where they could live. It's a roof over their head. It was a nice house, a roof over their head, where they would have like daily Bible studies, and there was a network of men for them to support them, and they would help them um get their shit together. They would help them get a job and keep their job, to basically reintroduce them as functioning members of society. And I remember sitting in the audience, being like the atheist community has nothing like this, you know? There's nothing that the atheist community offers like this, you know? And it just I remember just being like, this is really cool. It's really cool that uh Christians do stuff like this. And so anyway, all that to say that like I don't have any problems with this church. I don't think there's anything wrong with being an evangelical. But I think that if the more that I learn about just being a Christian, and this is like according to scripture, like, yeah, you make that choice, but then what about the whole entire rest of your life? You know, what are you doing? It like as soon as you say, all right, I've accepted Jesus into my heart, like then what? You know,
Right. That's not
then
the
you
end of the
just
journey.
exactly like that's the very,
That's
very
the start.
beginning. And so in orthodoxy they have this concept called theosis, and it is whenever you describe it, it sounds like I remember the first time that I heard a bunch of red flags went up. But theosis is the process of becoming like God, you know? And on its face it sounds like, oh, that sounds like exactly what Lucifer did. Like he wanted to be like God, you know? But it's not that. It is the everybody hears about being Christ-like, you know? But being actually like Christ, like that's not an overnight thing. Christ was a perfect a perfect person, you know? And so becoming Christ-like, it's going to take a lifetime to achieve that. And that process is called theosis, and that's what the orthodoxy revolves around is theosis. It is the day-to-day dying to yourself, daily repentance. It is the process of drawing out like sin, like you do poison from like a snake bite or something, you know? You have to draw that out and it takes time. And there that concept exists in other like Protestant denominations, like in Wesleyan and Nazarene denominations, they preach holiness doctrine and they teach something called sanctification, which is it's the same thing. It's theosis. They just call it sanctification, and it's basically it's the process, a lifelong process of getting rid of your sin nature, you know? And um and the Orthodox Church like that's what their whole thing is. And it makes sense because I'm like, okay, well you kind of walk into an Orthodox church and the assumption is that you have already made that decision, you know? And now it's like, okay, well do you want to like start this journey of becoming like God, of becoming sinless and holy, you know? And also, like another cool thing, the Orthodox Church, their Bible is different than the modern day churches, and they have these extra books. And there's a couple times in the Bible where it says like, "Hey, a zillion curses to anybody who either takes away from this book or adds to it." You know, basically saying this book has to stay the same. And Martin Luther, um, he took away some of his books. You know, and so it's one of
His
those things.
movement.
His movement, yeah, like they took away the first and second Maccabees books, which is the first and second Maccabees books talks about the the concept of purgatory, you know, and in the context of theosis and the Orthodox Church, like purgatory actually starts to make a lot of sense, you know. And so think of it this way, and I think that I think that scripture actually really does back this up. The Israelites were led out of Egypt. And you have to understand that the story of the Israelites leaving Egypt and going into Canaan is a I guess that would be a macrocosm of a typical Christian life. All right. So if you substitute the Israelites for you, all right, when the Israelites were brought out of Egypt, they were saved. Okay. You were brought out of Egypt. You were saved. Egypt is the old
Sin.
you. It's sin. Yeah. So uh so you were saved, you were brought out of Egypt, and then you have to travel to Canaan. So you're traveling there. Canaan is a stand-in for heaven, or the kingdom of heaven. All right. When you get there, there's the Jordan River, and they can't enter yet. So they send in these spies, all right, to go and check. And they sent out 12 spies. 10 of them came back and said, there's these Canaanites. They're huge, giant people. They'll kill us all. And then two came back and were like, no, we can totally take them. We have God on our side. All right. So those two and their families were able to enter Canaan because they had faith in God. And that's why all the Israelites had to wander the desert for 40 years, because they didn't have faith. All right. And so what God says is none of them will see the kingdom of heaven. That whole generation has to die off so that the new generation can enter the kingdom of heaven. So that old generation, that's the old you that has to die. And that's the old you that um maybe has problems with lust, maybe has problems with, I don't know, stealing or something. Like the old you that has that sin nature has to die so that the new you can go through the Jordan, through which is baptism, and then enter into Canaan, which is the kingdom of heaven. All right. So that 40 years is basically like your everyday life. Every day you have to repent, but what if you die and that process isn't completed yet? You haven't fully reached theosis, you know? So in the first and second Maccabees, and listen, this is where I'm kind of out of my depth because I haven't actually read those books. And so I'm just kind of talking going off of things I've read elsewhere or heard elsewhere. But like that's where it talks about this idea of purgatory, where it's like if you're in the middle of that process of pulling out all that sin, but you're not done yet, if you've sort of dedicated yourself to fixing this problem so that you can get into the kingdom of heaven, is God just going to be like, oh well, you didn't finish in time, you're going to hell? No, there's this, the idea is like, if you've started this process, this is the place that you go in the meantime to finish that process, so that way you can enter the kingdom of heaven, because it does say explicitly in the Bible there is no sin that can be allowed in the kingdom of heaven, none. So then
Yeah.
if you're on your deathbed, if you're on your deathbed and you reach over and look at the Gideon Bible and you crack it open and you read it and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I need Christ in my life." You're nowhere near theosis. Like you're still basically your old self, but you've made this decision. Like that person, they still have all that sin inside them that has to be removed. Purgatory is the place where you go to remove that, to finish removing it.
Yeah, it's an interesting because I've obviously heard of purgatory, and I think most people listening have heard of that concept, but I didn't understand like who sits in that and where is that and how do you get out of it? And
Yeah.
it's I mean it definitely conflicts with a lot of things that I was taught brought up, obviously that not by works of righteousness.
Right.
So you can't earn and you can't, and to me like trying to be like God is trying to earn your way into heaven,
Hmm.
doing things and doing the right things. And so I would be very hesitant to say, because I think that's not scriptural, because it is through Jesus dying on the cross, is what got us into heaven, not by trying to be perfect is what's going to
Right.
get us in heaven. So it's a I'd be curious to learn more.
Hmm. And I've probably done a terrible job of explaining it. But it's not that we are saved through our works. It is that we're saved because Christ died on the cross for us. We are able to we're not able to enter into the kingdom of heaven until all of that sin nature inside of us is gone. You know, because listen, June 2nd of 2025, That's the day I accepted Christ into my heart. And I had this horrible addiction to pornography that started when I was 9, you know, that ended that day. All right. And for about 6 months, I did really, really well. I didn't even think about pornography, you know? And then I started feeling that temptation again, found myself looking at pornography, you know? And so I had to get rid of all the things that, and X was one of those things. That's one of the reasons I got rid of X, is because I was like, there's too much porn on here. It's too easy to find, you know, and I need to, most of my feed was bots anyway. And so I was like, I just need to get rid of this thing. I need to stop engaging in it, and I need to stay away. Um, but
Just avoid the temptation.
yeah. Now, since I've done that, like, I'm on another pretty long stretch of not even thinking about it, not feeling tempted. Does that mean that I'm never going to feel tempted again? No. Does that mean I'm never going to have a lustful thought again? No. But before I can enter the kingdom of heaven, all that stuff has to be gone. All that stuff has to be behind me, you
You don't
know?
think that, like, when you die, the flesh dies and that the flesh is where most of your sin lives, your spirit. So you're saying the spirit inherits the sinful nature of the flesh, and therefore, if the spirit isn't good enough, it sits in purgatory until it can be good enough? Or
Maybe. And again, listen, if anybody's listening and they've I've been to an Orthodox church twice.
so
Okay.
you're
So
speaking from experience.
listen, I don't want to pretend that I understand these concepts very well. The way that they've been explained to me, and I have not actually like sat down with the Orthodox priest and just picked his brain, but like the way that it was explained to me is that, theosis is a lifelong process, and if you're in the middle of that process is removing the the sort of carnal nature that humans have, you know, and it all has to be gone before you can enter the kingdom of heaven, you know.
Is that kind of where the idea of saints and sainthood is? Those are people that have reached theosis, like they crossed somehow, whatever, they lived their life well enough, and they're I know the Catholics say that a lot of it has to do with the stigmata, and there has to be, a clear,
Miracles and
yeah,
yeah,
show that God has chosen this person and is
yeah.
acting through them.
hmm I
But I
know
always
I
kind of
know that
wondered,
the
like,
Catholic Church has certain criteria. I don't know what the Orthodox's criteria is though, Um, but I would imagine that, like, yeah, a person who has achieved theosis, you know, you wouldn't saint somebody um who had not achieved theosis. But that's me literally pulling that out of thin air. I have no idea, you know.
yeah,
But the biggest point that I was trying to make, and man, I've been going off for like 20 minutes about this, is the Orthodox Church focuses on your day-to-day life after the decision's been made. And it's not all orbiting around just making the decision, you know. That's
yeah,
what I really like about it, is that it's like, hey, this is where the imagery of like a minister being a shepherd and his congregation being his flock. That's where that imagery really, really comes to light, or it really starts to make sense, because it's like, yeah, he's held responsible for his congregation, and so that's his incentive to not steer us the wrong way. And
right.
also, like the Orthodox church that I go to, there's not a lot of people that go. There's maybe like 30 people in there. But it's like he's got a relationship with every single one of them, and he knows the things that they struggle with, and he's appointed to be their like spiritual father, which is why you call a priest father. And it's just I like the idea of like having a a a source of accountability like that,
It
you
makes it more
know?
of a community.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And that was one thing, going back to Andrew Wilson. he was talking about the Orthodox Church. He's like, there's this whole community of people who just want to see you succeed. You know, they want to see you succeed. They want to make sure that you're okay. They want to make sure that you're taken care of, you know, and he's like that's what the Orthodox Church really provides is community, you know. And it's just the more that I go and the more that I learn about the Orthodox Church, the more I'm just absolutely fascinated by it, you know. And it's just such a cool thing. It's not the big loud concert. You go in and you realize like, oh, this is like an ancient, you know, this is an ancient thing that we're participating in. And
That people have been doing for centuries.
for yeah, for millennia, you know, for the last 2000, like the simplest idea is that you could take somebody from the first century, you could take a first century Christian and plop them into an Orthodox church and they'll be like, yeah, this is church, you know, like it doesn't feel different or you know, you know, out of the ordinary to them. They're just like, yeah, this is church, you know. And I mean, there's symbolism everywhere. There's imagery everywhere. There's all this iconography, all these like for me, my freaking autistic brain, like it's so fun just going in there and looking at all these pictures and and seeing on the stage or whatever. I don't know. There's this partition, you know, and there's all these pictures and you're like, I wonder why there's 12 pictures. Oh, it's probably because the 12 disciples, you know. I wonder why this, you know, saint in this icon is doing this thing with his hand, you know. Like whenever you see Catholics and Orthodox, you know, they
Cross themselves.
yeah, they cross themselves. They're doing a specific thing with their hand, you know. And even that you can pick apart. These three fingers represent the
The
Trinity,
Trinity.
and I don't remember what these two represent, but it's like there's a special way to do it. There's a special way to hold your hand, and it's all symbolism. So for me, it's just fun to go in and just try to pick things apart and see the deeper meaning, you know. Um, but I tell you what, the two times I've been in there have just been beautiful because you go in and they're swinging the censer around and so it smells like incense and it's a very multi-sensory experience. You go in and like and it like it just informs your brain like, hey, this is the place where we're going to worship our
We are
creator.
in the presence of God.
We're in the presence of God. There's a smell to it, there's a sound to it, you know, there's a feel to it, you know. And um it's just it's really cool. You know, it's really really cool.
Yeah,
So
I can't wait to join you because I for me like religion and similar to politics is a thirst for knowledge.
yeah,
I'm always one, and I think that's why we get along so well. Is always asking questions, always pushing back, always saying that doesn't make sense. Tell me more. And too often in the churches that I've attended, is it's more built around emotion. So you kind of get a little bit of a contact buzz when you leave. You're like, oh, I'm feeling good about myself,
yeah,
and but I don't walk out going, what did I learn? And more often than not, I didn't learn anything. And if I'm not being taught, because I look at pastors as teachers, and that's what I kind of look at and value the most. And that's probably just me, or I'm sure other people have different motivations for picking different churches. Community being a big one, but for me, it's learning. Like I want to learn.
yeah.
And I feel like even being in church my entire life, going to Awana, memorizing, I think through Awana, I think I memorized like a quarter of the Bible,
Hmm.
but I've only scratched the surface.
Yeah,
And so to have a place where you can go and you can learn and you can ask questions and you can push back, and like that's to me an ideal church is a community being led by somebody who knows more than you. And
hmm,
so that that's what you're trying to obtain is, I want to download that knowledge and I want to proof test it and validate it.
yeah,
um, and yeah, and I think I'm not alone in that. I think there's a hunger. A lot of people are finding like what I'm eating, in my, the church that I'm going to, what I'm consuming at that church. Maybe I'm not consuming anything, or maybe it's just temporary.
yeah,
But if it's not changing your life and making you think differently, it's almost like movies, like good movies. When you walk out of the theater, like you should be having a conversation, whether it's with the person you saw the movie with or you're texting your friends going, whoa. But if you just walked out of a, a movie and it was just like, I'll never see that again. To me, that's not, especially if you're spending your money and your time. Church, church is like that too. Like a good church, you should walk out of that, after the sermon or after the service is over and be like, wow, I got to change this about my life, or I got to investigate this more. I got to read this, Bible verse, or I got to find this in the Bible. It should test you and it should push you. And if it doesn't, maybe it's not value added.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I I here's the thing. There's not really, you know, what the last time I went, it was the third Pashka Sunday, which is like they celebrate Easter 3 consecutive Sundays. Um and I went to the third one with my mom, 'cause she was up here visiting, and uh that Sunday was all dedicated to the myrrh bearing women. So myrrh as in frankincense and myrrh.
The spice, yeah.
Yeah. Um it was all dedicated to the myrrh bearing women, like Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, the women who found Jesus's tomb empty, you know? Because all the men, like, they were afraid, and so they were in hiding. But the women who were associated with Jesus, they're like, no, we're gonna go check. And they went and checked, and he was gone, you know? And Jesus said multiple times to his followers, like, yeah, I'm gonna die and I'm gonna raise from the dead. And it was the women who were the only ones who were like, yeah, we're gonna go see his tomb because he said it was gonna be empty, you know? And uh so it was it was a good service, but like they don't do like a typical sermon, They don't do like the rituals and then he's like, all right, let's talk for 40 minutes, The sermon is called the homily, and it is usually only 5 or 10 minutes long. And um, if you're wanting to go to a church where every time that you go in there, you want some new revelation, like the Orthodox Church is probably not going to do that for you. You know, um, it's it's something that for me, um, I I don't know. I don't know if any church could really scratch that itch for too long, I think
Well,
I
and
think if
not every, I mean, you can't walk into every Sunday expecting to
well,
have your
right,
mind
well,
blown.
like, I've been reading, well, I haven't this week, but um I've been reading Ecclesiastes and the book of Matthew simultaneously, and there are some days where I'll read two chapters of Matthew and two chapters of Ecclesiastes, or two chapters of where I'm at in the New Testament and then where I'm at in the Old Testament. So there have been several times where I go and I read and I'm like, wow, like I come across a verse and it's like dealing specifically with what I'm feeling or with what I'm going through, or maybe doubts that I have, or maybe it speaks to an experience I just had with somebody. And then there's other times that I read and I'm like, I didn't get anything. I didn't get nothing out of anything. And I feel like the I feel like the Orthodox Church is not a place where you're going to go in and walk out and be like, "Oh my gosh, my mind is just blown with what the priest said. Like he said these words in this perfect way or whatever." Like, I don't know, it's just not like that. It's more about the community, it's more about the traditions, you know. Um and it's more about the symbolism, really, what everything represents, you know. But
Yeah, I'm fascinated. I mean, especially coming from, like, I spent a large chunk of my life in the Mennonite church. And the
yeah.
Mennonite church is literally the exact opposite of orthodoxy. They believe that all the symbolism, all of the decorative, all the saints, like that is all distracting from what you should be focusing on is Christ.
Yeah.
So it is it'd be, I did date, a Catholic girl briefly. So I did, experience some Catholic services. Um, so it's very in very interesting kind of a frame of reference, and everybody kind of comes in with that their own unique experiences, and they judge accordingly or interpret accordingly. Um, but it is there's clear increased demand for something real, and I think you're seeing a lot more people looking at Orthodox churches, at Catholic churches, because they're not getting filled in their
Yeah.
Protestant church.
Yeah.
They're not
Yeah, I
finding.
think I think that a lot of the Protestant, especially the evangelical churches, I think the thing that people really, just like you said, the thing that people are sort of waking up to is that this is all like fluff
Performative.
and filler, and you know, eh, and again, nothing against the church that I was going to, because they do a great job at the community aspect of it, but like a lot of the other churches that I've been to, like, where's the community? Do you talk to any of these people after you get out of church? Or do you just see them once a week? Like, how much of this is like, we're gonna say Jesus X amount of times in this sermon, you know, um, or we're gonna talk about how, hey, the Bible says to be a good steward with your money. The Bible talks about, hey, don't be a jerk to your friends. Like, all of these really surface level kind of fluff piece sermons, and where's the realness? Where's the it never feels like real life. It all feels like Hallmark Christmas movies.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And okay, so actually that's a I feel like that's a much better analogy than I thought it would be. But like, the evangelical churches are like Hallmark Christmas movies, and to some people out there that works out great for them. That's fine for them. They love Hallmark Christmas movies, and that's fine. That works for some people, but for other people, they are more of a Christopher Nolan person, where they need something that you can pick apart. They need something that means something a little bit deeper, you
Hmm.
know and I've always been that kind of person. I've always been somebody who's like, I would much rather watch a 3 hour long Christopher Nolan movie, or a 3 hour long Kubrick movie, and just pick it apart, because everything means something.
Right.
you know I feel like that's an itch that a lot of people need scratched, because not just not just church, but like, our millennials, especially, our whole entire world that has been built around us is fake. it's
Yeah.
all it's all performative, it's all fake, it's all a sham.
The food we eat, half
The
of it,
food we eat
or
is
if not
fake.
more, is all fake.
Hmm. Like,
Yep.
what was it,
TikTok,
t-
Facebook, it's all fake.
yeah, yeah,
It's all what other people want you to think of them, but that's not actual truth.
yeah. Well, it's like, one of the things that I've seen that just, it makes me laugh every time. But there are whores on online, whether it's Instagram or TikTok, but you go across, they're like, buy my slutty shirt. It's this chick with her boobs sticking out, or she's got like a bunch of cleavage showing, and she's like, I'm an Orthodox girly, you know, and it's like, "Ugh, no, you're not." Like, ugh. Yeah. but that's just more of the same. Like, our world, our entire lives has been a constructed facade, you know.
Distraction.
And this second Trump administration, I think, is where that has kind of peaked, and people en masse are just wanting something that is real, you know.
Yeah, because I think the fakeness is so blatantly obvious. I mean, we had Biden, the constant, he's sharp as a tack. He's never been, he's top of his game.
Hmm.
Everybody can see that was fake. And, it's this, we got another president.
Trump's 99% approval rating,
Yeah,
you
of people
know?
who already approve of him. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Of course, they, you're polling people who are told you, yes, I support Trump, and then you're going to say, well, it's so fake.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree. I think that there is, because of it's so blatantly obvious now, where everybody, even the left and the right, so many people are finally waking up, and kind of back to what we were talking about before about the trust in institutions.
Hmm.
That's something that irritates me even when Tucker talks about how we need to get trust back in our institutions. It's like, you're never supposed to blindly trust power. Like
Yeah.
that, we have had a lack of pushing back against institutions for a long time, and that's why we're where we're at, because we've been complacent, and we've allowed ourselves to be distracted by the fluff, and the
Yeah.
UFOs, and it's all fake. And so peeling that back and looking behind the curtain and going, oh, this is all just cultivated for my to distract me. And people are, I think, are waking up to that. I think we almost need to have those big tent revivals of like, no, we're coming back to our roots. We're learning what it is to be an American. Um, and I think it's a healthy thing to push back. Now, I don't know if it's too late. Um, there is that idea of like, if the ship's going full speed, kind of the Titanic, like turning it at the last minute could actually make it worse.
Yeah.
But it is something that I think is it's good that we're having these discussions and that we are seeing behind the curtain. The question is, what happens next?
Yeah. Yeah. That's an excellent question. And I mean, that's the question that we try to ponder on just about every episode, you know.
Hmm.
I think if there is a large portion of the United States that is going back to church, cannot be a bad thing, you know.
Correct.
Um so it's, you know me, I'm the perpetual silver lining guy. I try to always look at the positive angle of things. Um I think that's another reason why nobody's buying the aliens. Nobody's buying the alien story because they're like, you know what? I'm pretty sure scripture would have mentioned if God had created life elsewhere, you know? And um or people saying like, "Oh, if they're seeing something, it's demons." You know? We're just not accepting that there's, little green men. And I think that's a good thing.
As much as I think Hillary Clinton could be an evil reptile creature, she's
Well,
probably just a
she's the
horrible
one
woman.
exception. She 100% is an evil reptile creature. uh, so, but anyway, I think this is a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah.
You have any final thoughts, Ben?
No, no, I miss these conversations. Hopefully, we can do these more often. I know our work schedules are not always aligned, and so that's always trying to find time to do this. But I appreciate it. I mean, we've talked about it before. It's great to because we're, at least I can speak for me. I'm constantly consuming information, but at some point it feels like you're just going to blow up, because it's like, there's only so many people you can chase around the local watering hole going, did you hear about, and it's like, dude,
Yeah.
go away. I'm here to watch the game. Um, so having an out like this, I can't say enough how much I appreciate it. So thanks everybody for listening. And we'll try to do these more often.
Yep. Um, if you want to follow me on TikTok. Don't look
Where's
at
where's
the
home?
X, or my house. I mean, anyway, don't follow me on X. Follow me on TikTok. Um, I don't post all that often, but if you want to follow me outside of this podcast, that's where you can. Um, anyway, we're supposed to be interviewing somebody over the weekend, so I hope that all works out because it's a pretty cool guest.
Yeah.
So, and if it winds up not happening, just forget I said anything. So, anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. Like and subscribe and share this. Tell your friends about us. That's the only way that we're going to grow is through word of mouth. Maybe if we got to a point where we were recording consistently, that could probably help us grow too. But I don't know. That's a
Horse cart, yeah.
right. So anyway, thank you so much. Have a great night. Take care.